All right, chapter 2. Early boyhood. Early boyhood. I am a Lakota of the Ogallala band. My father's name was Black Elk, and his father before him bore the name, and the father of his father, so that I am the fourth to bear it, which is kind of cool. He was a medicine man, and so were several of his brothers. Also, he and the great crazy horse's father were cousins, having the same grandfather. My mother's name was White Cow. Nope, White Cow Sees. And her father was called Refuse to Go, and her mother, Plenty Eagle Feathers. I can remember my mother's mother and her father. My father's father was killed by the Pawnees when I was too little to know, and his mother, Red Eagle Woman, died soon after. I was born in the moon of the popping trees, aka December. Oh yeah, the way he talks about months is really cool, how each month has its own name, which we have names for our months now, obviously. But it's interesting and kind of cool to see how they named the months in Black Elk's tribe as related to what was happening in the month, nature-wise. It's cool. Okay, I was born in the moon of the popping trees, December, on the Little Powder River in the winter when the 4 cows were killed, which is 1863. So get your mind into 1863. A long time ago. Okay. And I was 3 years old when my father's right leg was broken in the Battle of the 100 Slain. From that wound, he limped until the day he died, which was about the time when when Bigfoot's band was butchered on Wounded Knee. 1890, which we will talk about. He's buried there in these hills. I can remember that the winter of the 100 Slain was. I can remember that the winter of the 100 Slain, as a man may remember some bad dream he dreamed when he was little, but I cannot tell just how much I heard when I was bigger and how much I understood when I was little. It's like some fearful thing in a fog, for it was a time when everything seemed troubled and afraid, which you can probably relate to with your own memories. I do. Sometimes when I'm real little, I think I remember something, but I really don't. I saw pictures of it, and I heard my mom talking about it, and I think I actually have a memory about it, but it's not. It's made of other people's interpretations, and then I kind of put the feeling that I remember into it. I don't know. Interesting. I had never seen a Wasatchu then, and I did not know what one looked like. But everyone was saying that the Wasatchus were coming, or Wasatchus, that they were going to take our country and rub us all out, and that we should all have to die fighting. It was the Wasatchus who got rubbed out in that battle, and all the people were talking about it for a long while. But 100 Wasatchus was not much if there were others and others without number where those came from. Just a couple of things. The term rub out is what he uses to mean wipe out, get rid of, aka kill. We are talking about Custer's Last Stand. You'll notice historically some of the battles have multiple names, which makes sense because each language has different names for things. So that's what we're talking about right now. I remember once that I asked my grandfather about this. I said, when the scouts come back from seeing the prairie full of bison somewhere, the people say that the Wasatchus are coming. And when strange men are coming to kill us, they say the Wasatchus are coming. What does it mean? And he said, it means that there are many. When I was older, I learned what the fighting was all about that winter and the next summer. Up on the Madison Fork, the Wasatchus had found much of the yellow metal that they worship and that makes them crazy. And they wanted to have a road up through our country to the place where the yellow metal was. But my people didn't want the road. It would scare the bison and make them go away. And also, it would let the other Wasatchus come in like a river. They told us that they wanted only to use a little land, as much as a wagon would take between the wheels. But our people knew better. And when you look about you now, you can see what it was that they wanted. So a couple of things here. I guess I don't have an answer in the text, so you're going to have to infer again, which is an easy inference, I think. But what is the yellow metal that he's talking about? And also, this is the beginning, I guess, in the PowerPoint introduction. We went over several of the promises that the government made. And we talked about that in 9th grade when you read Code Talkers. We talked about that again. Historically, our government has been saying oh yeah, sure, we promise we'll even make it a treaty and we'll sign it, because you know how signed documents work. You can't break them. Nope. Over and over again, the government broke its treaties. And so Black Elk is talking about that. Once we were happy in our own little country, and we were seldom hungry, for the two-leggeds and the four-leggeds lived together like relatives, and there was plenty for them and for us. But the Wasichus came, and they have made little islands for us, and other little islands for the four-leggeds, and always these islands are becoming smaller, for around them surges the gnawing flood of the Wasichu, and it is dirty with lies and greed. Another inference, I think I asked you, like, what are the islands? So think about how we islandize, which is a verb I just made up, people back in this time. Think about how we did that to them. A long time ago, my father told me what his father told him, that there was once a Lakota holy man called Drinkswater who dreamed what was to be. And this was long before the coming of the Wasichus. He dreamed that the four-leggeds were going back into the earth, and that a strange race had a strange race had woven a spider's web all around the Lakota. And he said, when this happens, you shall live in square gray houses in a barren land, and beside those square gray houses you shall starve. They say he went back to Mother Earth soon after he saw this vision, and that it was sorrow that killed him. You can look about you now and see that he meant these dirt-roofed houses that we are living in, and that all the rest was true. Sometimes dreams are wiser than waking, which I think I asked you a question about this too. Have you ever had a dream that comes true? Have you ever had a dream that tells you something important, or answers a question that you had, or makes you feel a certain way about something? Dreams are powerful. And while I don't think that they tell the future in my life, I think they can definitely answer questions that we have. So he's just saying sometimes the answers or what we're looking for can be found when we're not actually looking, when we're sleeping. And so when the soldiers came and built themselves a town of logs there on the piney fork of the Powder River, my people knew that they meant to have their road and to take our country and maybe kill us all when they were strong enough. Crazy Horse was only about 19 years old then, and Red Cloud was still our great chief. In the moon of the changing season, October, he called together all the scattered bands of the Lakota for a big council on the Powder River. And when we went on the warpath against the soldiers, a horseback could ride through our villages from sunrise until the day was above his head. So far did our camp stretch along the valley of river, for many of our friends had come to help us fight. And it was about when the bitten moon was delayed, the last quarter, in the time of the popping trees, when the 100 were rubbed out. My friend Fire Thunder here, who's older than I, remember there's old people around when he's telling all these stories, he was in that fight, and he can tell you how it was. So then Fire Thunder tells his story. He says, I was 16 years old when this happened, and after the big council on the Powder, we had moved over to the Tongue River, where we were camping at the mouth of the Pino Creek. There were many of us there, and Red Cloud was all over us. Red Cloud was over all of us, but the chief of our band was Big Road. We started out on horseback just about sunrise, riding up the creek toward the soldiers' town on the Piney, for we were going to attack it. The sun was about halfway up when we stopped at the place where the Wasichu's road came down a steep, narrow ridge and crossed the creek. It was a good place to fight, so we sent some men ahead to coax the soldiers out. While they were gone, we divided into two parts and we hid the gullies on both sides of the ridge and waited. After a long while, we heard a shot up over the hill, and we knew the soldiers were coming. So we held the noses of our ponies that they might not whinny at the soldiers' horses. And soon we saw our men coming back, and some of them were walking and leading their horses so that the soldiers would think that they were worn out. Tricky. Then the men we had sent ahead came running down the road between us, and the soldiers on horseback followed, shooting. And when they came to the flat at the bottom of the hill, the fighting began all at once. I had a sorrel horse, and just as I was going to get up on him, the soldiers turned around and began to fight their way back at the hill. I had a 6-shooter that I had traded for, and also a bow and arrows. When the soldiers started back, I held my sorrel with one hand, and I began killing them with the 6-shooter before they came close to me. There were many bullets, but there were more arrows. So many that it was like a cloud of grasshoppers all above and around the soldiers, and our people, shooting across, hit each other. The soldiers were falling all the while they were fighting back up the hill, and their horses got loose. Many of our people chased the horses, but I was not after horses. I was after Wasichus. When the soldiers got up on top, there were not many of them left, and they had no place to hide. They were fighting hard. We were told to crawl up on them, and we did. When we were close, someone yelled, "Let us go! This is a good day to die! Think of the helpless ones at home!" And then we all cried "Ho-ka-hey" and rushed at them. I was young then and quick on my feet, and I was one of the first to get in among the soldiers. They got up and fought very hard, until not one of them was alive. They had a dog with them, and he started back up the road for the soldiers' town, howling as he ran. He was the only one left. I didn't shoot at him because he looked too sweet, but many did shoot, and he died full of arrows. So there was nobody left of the soldiers. Dead men and horses and wounded Indians were scattered all the way up the hill, and their blood was frozen, for a storm had come up and it was very cold and getting colder all the time. We left all the dead lying there, for the ground was solid, and we picked up our wounded and started back, but we lost most of them before we reached our camp at the mouth of the Pino. There was a big blizzard that night, and some of the wounded who did not die on the way died after we got home. This was the time when Black Elk's father had his leg broken. Okay, so one of the first stories that we hear about a battle, definitely interesting. Historically, a lot of the ones that we hear about are the opposite, but there we are. Okay, so Black Elk continues. I'm quite sure that I remember the time when my father came home with a broken leg that he got from killing so many Wasichus, and it seems that I can remember all about the battle too, but I think I could not. It must be the fear that I remember most. All this time I was not allowed to play very far away from our teepee, and my mother would say, "If you're not good, the Wasichus will get you," which is similar to things that I tell Silas sometimes, like, "If you're not good, I'm going to take your toys." I mean, just common parental threats. We must have broken camp at the mouth of the Pano soon after the battle, for I can remember my father lying on a pony drag with bison robes all around him like a baby, and my mother riding the pony. The snow was deep and it was very cold, and I remember sitting in another pony drag beside my father and mother, all wrapped up in fur. We were going away from where the soldiers were, and I do not know where we went, but it was west. It was a hungry winter, for the deep snow made it hard to find the elk, and so many of the people went snowblind. Interesting. We wandered a long time, and some of the bands got lost from each other. Then at last we were camping in the woods beside a creek somewhere, and the hunters came back with meat. I think it was the same winter when a medicine man by the name of Creeping went around among the people curing snowblinds. He would put snow upon their eyes, and after he had sung a certain sacred song that he had heard in a dream, he would blow on the backs of their heads, and they would see again. So I have heard. It was about the dragonfly that he sang, for that was where he got his power, they say. When it was summer again, we were camping on the Rosebud, and I did not feel so much afraid, because the Wasichus seemed farther away, and there was peace in the valley, and there was plenty of meat. But the boys from 5 or 6 years were playing war. The little boys would gather together from the different bands of the tribe and fight each other with mud balls that they threw with willow sticks. After the big boys played the game called Throwing Them Off Their Horses, which is a battle, all but the killing. So they beat each other up with it, but they don't kill you. Oh, good, kids. And sometimes they got hurt. The horsebacks from different bands would line up and charge upon each other, yelling. And when the ponies came together on the run, they would rear and flounder and scream in a big dust, and all the riders would seize each other, wrestling until one side had lost all its men. For those who fell upon the ground were counted dead. This sounds like a very violent and dangerous game that I wouldn't want my own kids playing, but I can see how kids would like it. When I was older, I too often played this game. We were always naked when we played it, just as warriors are when they go off into battle if it's not too cold, because they are swifter without clothes. Once I fell off my back, I fell off on my back right into the middle of a bed of prickly pears. Oh, and it took my mother a long while to pick out all the stickers out of me. I was still too little to play war that summer, but I can remember watching the other boys, and I thought that when we all grew up and were big together, maybe we could kill all the Wasichus or drive them far away from our country. It's hard for me to understand. I mean, I can empathize, but it's hard for me to understand what it would be like to be so oppressed, to grow up as a child imagining that maybe your games of killing can turn into reality of killing those who are oppressing you. I don't know. It was in the moon when the cherries turned black, August, that all the people were talking again about a battle, and our warriors came back with many wounded. It was attacking the wagons, and it made me afraid again, for we did not win that battle as we did the other one. And there was much mourning for the dead. Fire Thunder was in that fight too, and he can tell you how it was. Okay, so we're going to learn about another battle. He said, it was very bad. There was a wide, flat prairie with hills around it, and in the middle of this, the Wasatchus had put their boxes of their wagons in a circle so that they could keep their mules there at night. So they made a fence. There were not many Wasatchus, but they were lying behind the boxes, and they shot faster than they ever shot at us before. We thought it was some new medicine of great power that they had, for they shot so fast that it was like tearing a blanket. Afterwards, I learned that it was because they had new guns that they loaded from behind, and this was the first time they had used these guns. Let's see, my note says they're Springfields. I don't know, is that like, I don't know. You guys know more about guns than I do. Machine guns, backward loading guns, I don't know. We came on after sunrise. There were many of us, so here we are getting up first thing in the morning again, that lucky star with being wise. There were many of us, and we meant to ride right over them and rub them out. But our ponies were afraid of the ring of fire and the guns that the Wasatchus made and would not go over. That makes sense. Our women were watching us from the hills, and we could hear them singing and mourning whenever the shooting stopped. We tried hard, but we couldn't do it, and there were dead warriors and horses piled all around the boxes and scattered over the plain. Then we left our horses in a gulch and charged on foot, but it was like green grass withering in a fire. So we picked up our wounded and went away. I do not know how many of our people were killed, but there were very many. It was very bad. I do not remember where we camped that winter, but it must have been a time of peace and plenty to eat. Now another dude is talking. I'm 4 years older than Black Elk, and he and I have been good friends since boyhood. Aw. I know it was on the Powder that we camped where there were many cottonwood trees. Ponies like to eat the bark of the trees, and it's good for them. That was the winter when High Shirt's mother was killed by a big tree that fell on her teepee. It was a very windy night, and there were noises that woke me. And then I heard an old woman had been killed, and it was High Shirt's mother. Shocking, kind of out of nowhere, but thank you for those details, Standing Bear. I was 4 years old then, says Black Elk, and I think it must have been the next summer that I first heard voices. It was a happy summer, and nothing was afraid because in the moon where the ponies shed, May, word came from the Wasatchus that there would be peace and that they would not use the road anymore and that all the soldiers would go away. Oh, okay, great. The soldiers did go away, and their towns were torn down, and the moon of falling leaves, November. They made a treaty with Red Cloud that said that our country would be ours as long as grass should grow and water flow. You can see that it is not the grass and the water that have forgotten. Ooh, that's such a great burn. Okay, let's talk about that really quickly. You'll in the movie that we watch, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, you'll see this actual signing of it and the signing of other treaties too. This is one that they had tried to get passed, and then it wouldn't work for a long time because the natives were like, no. And then the government was like, no, we promise. If you promise someone that they can like have it that way, as long as grass grows and water flows, I would, as I'm sure many of you would, interpret that to be like forever, because we just kind of assume that there's always going to be nature going on. There's always going to be grass growing over here. There's always going to be like water under the ground. We're good. And then his last line is, you can see it's not the grass and the water that have forgotten that we made this treaty. So, snap. Maybe it was not this summer when I first heard the voices, but I think it was because I know it was before I played with bows and arrows or rode a horse, and I was out playing alone when I heard them. It was like somebody calling me, and I thought it was my mother, but there was nobody there. This happened more than once and always made me afraid, so that I ran home. Okay, so this is the very beginning of his story that's coming up in the next chapter. But Black Elk is telling us about the first time that he heard voices. To hear voices in our culture now can be described several ways. I mean, insanity, we shrug it off a lot, like, oh, a person hears voices, or schizophrenia. I have a cousin who's schizophrenic. My uncle was schizophrenic. The idea that your brain is making voices is so crazy. Maybe being possessed. I mean, we see lots of horror movies and scary movies about like demons telling us things and no one else can see them. Maybe talking to God. Maybe being like super sick. I know sometimes, and we'll talk about this coming up, but when you have such a fever, you can hallucinate, and hallucinations can be voices, they can be visual. No, they can be visual or audio. I don't know. But if you know someone who like hears voices, it's so interesting. So he's telling us about the beginning. He heard voices throughout his whole life. Sometimes not. I mean, it was off and on, and we'll talk about that coming up. But to hear voices the first time when you're like 4, what would you do? And it scared him, so he ran home because he was like, that's not my mom. Who is talking to me? Okay. It was when I was 5 years old that my grandfather made me a bow and some arrows. The grass was young, and I was on horseback. A thunderstorm was coming from where the sun goes down, west. And just as I was riding into the woods along a creek, there was a kingbird sitting on a limb. This is not a dream. It happened. And I was going to shoot at the kingbird with the bow that my grandfather made when the bird spoke and said, "The clouds all over are one-sided." Perhaps it meant that the clouds were looking at me. I don't know. And then it said, "Listen, a voice is calling you." And then I looked up at the clouds, and 2 men were coming there head first, like arrows slanting down. And as they came, they sang a sacred song, and the thunder was like drumming. I'll sing it for you. The song and the drumming were like this. "Behold, a sacred voice is calling you. All over the sky, a sacred voice is calling." I sat there gazing at them, and they were coming from the place where the giant lives, the north. But when they were very close to me, they wheeled about toward where the sun goes down, and suddenly they were geese. And then they were gone. And the rain came with a big wind and a roaring, and I did not tell this vision to anyone. I liked to think about it, but I was afraid to tell it. Okay, so he's 4. And what's he doing? He's playing with a bow that his grandpa made him. Okay, cool. He's all by himself. And all of a sudden he hears the bird starts talking to him. I don't know about you, but I would be very terrified, as he said he was when this happened to him earlier, like other voices, whatever. This is one he remembers like very distinctly. And the bird said, "The clouds all over are one-sided." If something's one-sided, it means, like the other side is not reciprocating, unrequited love, not listening to someone. I don't know. And then this bird says, "Listen, a voice is calling you." And then these 2 dudes out of the sky are like diving for him. And then they turn around and they're like, and they turn into geese and like just go away. Oh my gosh, what is that? And he doesn't tell anyone because he's too afraid to tell it. Think about secrets that you may have had in your life and why you don't tell them. There's one. Okay, good. So next we'll get into the vision, the nugget of the whole book. But chapter 2, good job.